Welcome back to the Nano Scape series. My name is Logan, and today we're continuing the series with another Aqua Worx Iota terrarium. This time we're scaping the tall version. If you haven't seen the other videos in this playlist, that'll be linked down below in the video description, as well as in the end cards at the end of the video. So let's dive right into today's build and talk a little bit about the equipment we're working with today. So this is the Aqua Worx Iota Tall, and it's really just a beautiful, albeit challenging canvas to work with. Now the reason I say it's challenging is because all of that height is a really difficult challenge against gravity. If you're working with soil, you're gonna have to bank it up really high to make good use of the space. So I would say if you are banking up soil high, spray it down with some water to hold it into place before you start hardscaping and planting. Today, however, we're not gonna be working with soil at all. We're simply gonna be working with hardscape and epiphytic plants. And the vision of this little terrarium is essentially to be a showcase for different types of epiphytes. So we'll be working with different species of Anubias and Bucephalandra, as well as some other plants that work well attached to hardscape. As for the lighting and stand that will display this terrarium, I'm working with the ONF Flat Nano. So let's get started scaping this Aqua Worx Iota Tall. So the first thing I'm gonna do is get my substrate system in place. And for once, we're not working with soil. We're simply gonna be using an inert decorative gravel. And for this, I'm using the UNS Controsand Santa Fe. This is a really, really beautiful cosmetic gravel that has lots of nuance and differences between the individual pebbles, so it gives it a very natural look that I love for details. And we're just gonna add a very thin layer to support our hardscape. As for the main display hardscape today that will be featuring a variety of epiphytic plants, I'm working with a beautiful piece of dragonwood. This was originally part of another scape that I had in Portland, and I've had my eye on it as a display piece for this terrarium for a really long time. So prior to attaching the plants, which we're actually gonna do outside of the tank to make things easy, we're actually gonna just make sure it fits in really nicely in the terrarium, because the last thing you want to do is put together hardscape only to find it doesn't fit in the glass. Now that we can see that the wood is a nice snug fit, we're going to take it out and I'm going to lay it over to the side of the terrarium on a nice hand towel, and we can begin attaching the epiphytic plants. So I want to give a huge shout out to Bucephalandra. They sent me an amazing variety of epiphytic plants to work with today. So if you love Buce and Anubias, as the name implies, Bucephalandra, they're based up in LA, but they ship all over the country. They're the premier spot for plants like this. So the first plant we're working with is actually a really rare type of Anubias, and it's called Anubias Jungle Star. Anubias Jungle Star is known for darker green tones, which are gonna pop really nicely against the brown. What I wanna do with these epiphytes is have a variety of different tones of green so that certain sections pop and that there's some diversity all over the wood. In order to make sure that the plants stay nice and snug and in place, I'm using some cyanoacrylate-based superglue. Now, the plant will eventually grow roots and attach naturally, but this prevents them from falling off in those early rooting stages. However, if you have hardscape where you can easily secure things into place and kind of attach the plants in little nooks and crannies, you can completely skip the gluing process. I also recommend that if you have long roots with your plants, that you cut those off before attaching. They're gonna look a little bit unsightly, and by trimming them off, it'll stimulate the growth of new roots. Now it's time to add some more Anubias, and this species is called Anubias Stardust Mini, and it's also a really rare type of Anubias. So it looks nearly identical to Anubias non petite, so the leaves stay very, very small. However, as the name implies, there's little stardust spots throughout it, and it has a very light colored leaf, so it's gonna contrast really nicely from the previous plant and showcase a really interesting variety of Anubias that not too many people keep. Now we're gonna tie things together with a little bit more Anubias Jungle Star. I'm sort of creating what could be a natural growth pattern of the Anubias creeping up the piece of driftwood to continue that pattern and provide some natural looking growth that will eventually spread out even more. Next up, it's time to work with one of my favorite genuses, I don't know what the plural is. Anywho, we're gonna be working with some Bucephalandra, and Bucephalandra is super cool. It comes in so many different varieties, and this is the Bucephalandra Kettlegang Mini Roundleaf. Wow, that's a mouthful, I know, but this is a smaller version of Buce Kettlegang, and it has slightly more narrow leaves, so it's perfect for a little nanoscape, and in the case of this tiny little terrarium, it's gonna provide us with a really nice sense of scale, and it's gonna contrast very nicely from those different colored Anubias leaves. While our main piece of driftwood takes up the vast majority of this little terrarium, there's just enough space for one little supporting piece of wood that will fit in the foreground of the terrarium. So in order to give this little piece of wood life, I'm gonna glue some more Bucephalandra round mini to it, so it'll provide a nice little highlight area in the front of the terrarium for us. And with the largest of the epiphytes glued onto the wood, it's time to give everything a nice generous spray to make sure that the plants stay hydrated, and it's time to place the large piece of driftwood as well as the tinier piece into the terrarium. So you want to do this very delicately, number one, because you don't want to destroy your glass terrarium, and number two, because you want to pay attention to the orientation of the wood so that you're showcasing the plants and the interesting parts of the driftwood as nicely as possible. Now it's time to fill out the remainder of our composition, and I decided it would be a pretty cool idea to have some Yuncus repens in the foreground. So this plant is extremely versatile and grows really nicely almost anywhere you put it. So I'm adding it to the left and right sides of the terrarium directly into the gravel, which will tie things together really nicely and fill out our composition and give it more life. And finally, we'll add one more plant to our driftwood. We're gonna be adding some Hydrocotyle tripartita mini. This is a beautiful plant that grows like a clover, and once established will actually grow like a weed in a really interesting pattern. So you can plant Hydrocotyle tripartita directly into the soil, but it also does quite nicely glued on the hardscape. So I'm just kind of wedging it into the gaps between the driftwood and the glass to sort of fill out the composition and really give everything a nice lush filled in look. So this will be a plant that I'll have to keep a close eye out on. It is very prone to drying out and yellowing, but once established, like I said before, it grows really vigorously like a weed, so it could easily take over. If it makes it, I will have to do frequent trimmings, which is no problem. So with our scape complete, it's time to add some water. And for this setup, because most of our plants are epiphytic and not planted directly into the substrate, I'm actually gonna add a very small pool of water to the gravel itself. This will hydrate the wood, which will ultimately feed the plants with water and provide some nice humidity. But in addition to that, we'll spray it every day as the plants adapt to these new conditions. Once that's complete, we'll cap the terrarium, take a step back, and enjoy it. So I'm super excited to have this in my studio space. It's exactly what I envisioned, and I've always wanted a display piece that showcases different types of epiphytic plants. Buce and Anubias are probably two of my favorite species of plant we have the pleasure of keeping in this hobby. So to have a little display like this that showcases them in their immersed beauty with really vibrant coloration and spots is just a really cool thing. In addition to that, as these plants grow out, I'll be able to remove little trimmings and pieces of the rhizomes to propagate and add to my other scapes. If you've been digging this Nano series, you'll be excited to hear that next up I'll be scaping a shallow UNS aquarium. I have two really beautiful shallow aquariums that have always been a dream of mine to work with, and I'm excited to push my own hobby forward and maybe experiment with some new techniques and some immersed growth to take the plants outside of the aquarium itself and out into the air. So super excited for those projects. If you like this type of stuff, don't hesitate to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I've got so much cool stuff coming out this year, and I'm so excited to have you along for the journey. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Logan, and I'll catch you guys and gals next time.